microdose edibles that are up to 1.6 milligrams of THC each. That goes in accordance with Thai law. We also use the leaves of the plant rather than flower or distillate to create these products, which is a Thai law as well. So, without further ado, okay, edibles discussion. Opiates killed my dad. Cannabis saved his life. So this is actually my dad. He was about 17 when this happened. He was very happy about that weed. But opiates killed my dad and cannabis saved his life. Basically what this means is when I was younger, my father, he was constantly in and out of the hospital. He had a motorcycle accident, he nearly lost his foot during that, and he also had some car accidents as well that left him with herniated discs in his back. So there wasn't really a day in his life that he lived without chronic pain. And basically this was at the height of the opioid epidemic, which in the US, the doctors were prescribing opiates for everything, much like they do with cannabis in California when medical marijuana became legal there. But doctors were prescribing him opiates, and he was always joking about how if the doctors were to mix up his medication at the hospital, that there would be a crazy lawsuit. And he would always laugh about it, he would always laugh it off because he just thought that it was kind of funny that he had this very high tolerance to these addictive prescription medications. About 6 months before he passed, we found out actually that the opioid receptors were non-existent. So in essence, everybody has blood platelets with opioid receptors. His didn't exist. So the reason why he was being prescribed so many opiates was because he wasn't actually getting any relief from them, and it wasn't actually possible. So at the time, he thought that he needed to smoke a joint or eat an edible to activate his opiates and to receive his relief from pain. But the fact of the matter was that it was actually the cannabis, the magic of edibles. And now, with legalization in Thailand, we are experiencing just one more reason to smile in the land of smiles. And but the fact of the matter is, even though there is one more reason to smile in the land of smiles, it's important to understand edibles safety, edibles consumption, proper dosing before getting involved in edibles. But yeah, today I'm going to talk about getting started with edibles, give a bit of information about dosing, and also explain what edible consumption actually can do, what people experience, and what to do if you do end up having a little bit too much THC. So, some important things to remember. THC is a psychoactive compound. It is the psychoactive cousin of CBD. Both of them have both medical and recreational use cases. With THC and CBD, they both actually go to the same cannabinoid receptors with the endocannabinoid system. So in essence, with THC, if you were actually to consume too much THC, one of the remedies for overconsumption of THC is actually CBD. So while it might sound a little bit contradictory, having more cannabinoids in your system can actually help alleviate the negative symptoms that you might be feeling from a THC edible. But the most important thing to consider with edibles isn't actually the dosing, it's actually your body. So the way your body reacts to the edible is going to depend on many variables. One of the most important being your metabolism. So in essence, Your metabolism is going to determine the rate at which your body is absorbing THC. With that being the case, it's important to know your own body before you consume an edible. Now, 10 milligrams is too much, 20 milligrams is not enough. So if you've ever had an edible before, you've probably seen the number of milligrams is usually on the label. With 10 milligrams being too little and 20 milligrams being not enough, what I mean to say is sometimes you can take 10 milligrams today and have a totally different experience tomorrow if you were to eat that same 10 milligrams, depending on what's in your stomach and depending on your metabolism. You might, for example, running or physical activity will actually increase your metabolism rate. So in essence, if you were to eat 10 milligrams today and then eat 10 milligrams tomorrow after running a bit, your metabolism is actually going to be peaked. And that's going to result in the edible actually hitting you, coming on harder and stronger. Whereas if your metabolism is slower, or if you're doing something that might slow down your metabolism, then you might have a prolonged effect. So in essence, the high or the euphoria might last longer. It also might take longer to come on. So this is actually one of the reasons why so many people will actually not overdose, because overdose might be the wrong word, but they take too heavy of a dose. And the reason why they do that is because they're expecting this oncoming euphoria from the edible that they've consumed, but they're not waiting long enough to actually feel the effects. So what happens is people are looking at the time and they're wondering, okay, maybe this edible is not what I thought it was, let's try taking another. So they might double or even triple the dose that they originally took, even though all they actually had to do was wait a little bit longer. Now, I'll go over some doses just to give you a better idea of what to expect with edibles consumption. Now, 1 to 2.5 milligrams of THC is actually an effective microdose. This is the amount of THC that's in baked cookies. We do these microdose edibles that allow you complete control over your dosing. It's a very precise way to dose. Basically, we like to say eat 1, eat 2, eat 3, eat more. You can eat many of our cookies without experiencing what some would call a cannabis edible overdose. With this low dose of a microdose, you can expect to feel a little bit of euphoria, maybe a slight euphoria, a little bit more creative, a little bit of energy, a little bit more social. This is effective for people who like to do microdoses as well as people who are new to edibles. So this is actually what I'd like to call the perfect introductory level edible. Now, with 2.5 to 15 milligrams of THC, this is where you start to get into more of a THC dose rather than a microdose. This is where you're actually going to feel a high. You're going to feel slightly more euphoria, depending on how large of a dose it is. On the higher end of the spectrum, at 15 milligrams, you'll feel more of a high. You'll feel a little bit less, your perception can change, your coordination might be a little bit off. This is also good for symptom relief. So some women actually will use this to help with that time of the month, with cramps. People with headaches might take a dose around this to feel some relief. Maybe some slight pain, they can feel some relief from that. People that are looking for relief will usually consume this, but this is more so for people who don't need a higher dose of edibles to experience the symptom relief. Then there's also the people that will take this sort of a dose for sleeping. It'll help enhance your sleep and allow you to dream more vividly at night. This kind of contributes to, some people will say that it even contributes to more REM sleep. And it's also good for when you plan to go out. Nobody wants to go out on the town with too much THC in their system. You know, it's very easy to kind of go quiet and no longer socialize as much when you're getting into those higher THC ranges. So this is actually a good dose for if you like to go out and socialize, or if you're planning to be in some other social setting. That also comes into play with different types of strains. So like if you go for an indica, that's more of a couch lock kind of strain, whereas with a sativa, you're more creative, more energetic. It really just, it depends on the person, but if you do like socializing, the sativa and a lower dose of THC will definitely be better than a higher dose of THC or an indica strain. Now we're getting into some of the higher doses, 15 to 30 milligrams of THC. Now, for new consumers, this is about where you are kind of tiptoeing along the lines of too much. There is a lot of the time, this is like if you've ever had, let's say, a brownie that your college roommate had or made. This is usually what happens. This will usually be like the accidental overconsumption, which actually can turn people off to edibles when really all they needed was a lower dose. But 15 to 30 milligrams for a regular consumer, you can expect to experience more euphoria. But if you're a new consumer, there's a chance that you could green out, or you could have some panic attack or anxiety or something like that. That's why we usually advise people to start low and go slow, meaning we want you to enjoy the experience. We'd much rather you be underwhelmed than overwhelmed, because an overwhelming experience can really put a damper on edibles consumption. Like I know people who haven't had edibles in years because they had that one accidental green out experience in college or in high school where they became overly paranoid, or they found themselves ducking behind a table, thinking the police were after them when they're just in a park or something. It's having a high dose of THC is more so for people who are experienced with that. So it's important to start low and go slow. But this sort of a dose is also good for consumers who are experienced that would like to experience deeper sleep. That will promote that. And then we get into 30 to 50 milligram range. These are the more potent edibles on the markets usually. That people will use these for. This is more of a regular consumer treat, so to speak. Most people aren't consuming 30 to 50 milligrams at once every day. The microdose and like lower dose edibles, those are consumables that people will eat them every day to kind of complement their lifestyle, to complement the activities that they take part in. Ultimately, this is where you start to get that, in Thai they call it Mao, but it's more of it's like you're overly intoxicated in essence. This is the point where you get that stoned. And it will affect your coordination. So you obviously should not, at this point, you shouldn't really be operating any heavy machinery. You probably shouldn't be driving a car or a motorbike. It could also change your perception. You might be a lot more thoughtful, especially as an experienced consumer. It can promote some creativity as well, but this is kind of the point at which you can expect to feel stoned to the point that you have the munchies, that you are doing the characteristically, stereotypically stoner behavior. Now, the people that are using 30 to 50 milligram doses of edibles, those people are usually high tolerance users. So in essence, people that are smoking a couple of joints a day or smoking a blunt a day, people that are hitting bongs constantly, even people who are doing dabs or smoking concentrate. These people need the higher dose edibles because their tolerance has grown. The same with people who have a GI problem, where they have a difficult time absorbing the cannabinoids. That's the word I was looking for, absorbing. So cannabinoid absorption isn't something that is easy for everybody's body. So if somebody does have a difficult time absorbing those cannabinoids, that's when these higher doses become essential. And then we have 50 to 100 plus milligrams of THC. Now, this will definitely impair somebody's coordination regardless of their tolerance. This is something that people should not do unless they're very experienced with cannabis edibles. This is one of those things that will turn people.
You make these cookies though?
I'm sorry?
You make these cookies at 50 to 100 milligrams of THC?
No, we're not making 50 to 100 right now.
Yeah, that'd be still legal.
Yes. Anything, so right now, anything over 1.6 milligrams of THC per unit is actually illegal. So cannabis edible, that's why we're the only edibles here really, is because we are creating these 1.6 milligram THC edibles that allow people complete control over their dosing. This has allowed us to we're actually getting FDA approval, so our products actually won't be restricted to dispensaries. We'll be able to sell them in other locations as well, like cafes, bars, Big C, hopefully Tesco. So, yeah, but at this point, THC edibles past anything above 1.6 milligrams of THC that's made without using the leaves of the plant. So we use the leaves of the plant because that's one of the requirements put in place by the FDA in Thailand. We can't use distillate or any of these other products like flour even, because at this point it's not legal yet. However, it will be legal eventually. Right now we're in this weird lawless time where people are kind of, the regulations aren't really in place just yet. Like the main regulations that are in place for cannabis at least is, you can't sell to a pregnant woman and you can't sell to people under the age of 20. Those are really the two main laws in place, but we can expect other regulations to come about. We're waiting for those to happen before we start producing higher THC edibles under the Big but we do want to produce those higher edibles because there definitely is a place for them in the cannabis industry, specifically for cannabis consumers that need a higher dose of THC to actually feel anything. But for 50 to 100 milligrams of THC, these are the high tolerance THC consumers, so these people need this level. It's not for a beginner. A beginner that does take this is not going to have a good time. So if you do see 50 to 100 milligrams on a package, don't eat the whole thing. Eat the leg of the gummy. Don't eat the whole gummy, in essence. But at this level, you as a new consumer, you can expect to feel some pretty adverse side effects. You might feel pain, heart palpitations, anxiety, paranoia, this sort of thing. Your heart will start racing. It's not something that's for somebody who does not have experience with cannabis edibles. As I said before, you want to start out low and go slow and increase your edible THC over time. If you do eat an edible, even at a lower rate, it's important to wait and be patient because of this. You don't want to get to this point where you're eating 50 to 100 milligrams and this is more for the people who have a high tolerance and the patients that have chronic pain and chronic conditions that demand higher THC content for therapeutic purposes. So how long does it take to feel edibles? So that is one of the most common questions in the edibles industry. And the reason why this is such a common question is because there's so many different variables that can impact the way a person's body will feel an edible. Like I was saying before, 10 milligrams is too much and 20 milligrams is not enough. That's a real thing. There are different aspects, different things that can affect the way an edible will hit you. So for example, if you have a fast metabolism, you can expect a cannabis edible, you'll feel the effects of it usually within 30 minutes. But If you, let's say, were to have eaten a large meal beforehand, your body is still digesting that big meal, and your body's digestion, you're going to have to wait to feel those the effects of the edible, in essence. So basically, with an edible, you can expect the effects to come on within 30 minutes to 2 hours. So in essence, if you have a very fast metabolism, and you eat it on an empty stomach, that edible is actually going to hit you much harder and much faster. But with a guy like me, for example, with a slow metabolism, if I eat an edible, that is almost like, think of it as a time release edible for me. That's my experience. My experience is more of a time release edible because my metabolism is slow. But if I were to, let's say, exercise and then eat an edible, my metabolism is boosted. So that will actually make the edible come on harder and faster for me. And there's other things that can impact it, such as alcohol. If you drink alcohol with an edible, that will actually increase your THC the concentration of THC in your blood. Which is why, if you're having a problem with THC, it's highly recommended to avoid alcohol after consuming an edible. Unless you're experienced, of course, then it can be fine. So what should I expect if the edibles are too strong? Now, I feel like everybody experiences anxiety in this day and age. It's not really a new thing, but it's more spoken about now. But if you were to eat too much of an edible, THC, you can definitely expect some anxiety. Some weird thoughts will come into your head, and it's not necessarily the best feeling. You might feel a little bit nauseous. Now, while edible THC will actually, it will decrease nausea in some settings. However, if you eat too much of an edible, it's likely that you can get nauseous from that. You can also feel a little bit dizzy or disoriented, which is why it's advised not to drive a car or a motorbike if you're consuming an edible, especially if you're consuming an edible for the first time or you're not really familiar with it. It's important to remember that if you're doing an edible for the first time, it's important to kind of just, it's a learning experience. You're still learning how your body is going to react to the THC in the edible. And if you don't know that, it's important to learn. Now, some people might panic. I've actually had a friend of mine I've been making edibles over 10 years in the US. And when I was in the US, a friend of mine, he actually ate one of my cookies. He was the first person to ever have a real panic attack while on this edible. And I remember his mother called me and she's like, hey, and I'm like, hey, is everything okay? And she tells me, hey, he's in the hospital. And I'm like, really? Okay. She asked me if I could go take care of his dog while he was in the hospital. And I was like, yeah, sure. And I went to the hospital afterwards and I got there and he was telling me what happened. And apparently he had felt like he was going to die from my edible. So immediately, the first thing I did was I called our other friend because our other friend had eaten twice as much. So I was like, if he is in the hospital, maybe my other friend is in a bad place too. So I called him up and he's like, no, I'm okay. He was having a panic. My other friend that was in the hospital had this panic attack, and apparently when the ambulance came to pick him up, the medics actually told him, you can't die from weed, right? And my friend looked at him and said, what if I'm the first one? So it's important to remember that if you do consume an edible that's too strong, you probably will panic a bit, but it's important to just kind of remain calm with that. You might feel paranoid, you might feel like everybody's looking at you in a room or your friends don't like you or something weird like that you wouldn't normally think. But because of the THC and the way it's impacting your brain, you might feel a little bit paranoid. You might feel confused. You might not remember why you're there or what you're doing. You can also feel like if you feel like you're dying, you're probably going to sweat. One of the characteristics of having an overdose of THC is feeling as though you're dying, and I've never really felt like I'm dying myself, but I could imagine, I guess, that it would result in some paranoia and some, some issues. So what should you do if the edible is too strong? Now, this does happen every once in a while. This actually happened to me about a week ago, where I was like, oh, let's see how I feel about taking 50 milligrams of THC. I haven't done that in a while. And I took 50 milligrams of THC, and I found myself laying in my bed and wondering when it was going to pass and hoping it would be soon. But I didn't actually do any of this stuff. And if I would have, I probably would have felt much better, much faster. So the most important thing is to remember not to panic. It sounds a little bit contradictory to how you might be feeling. If you feel like you're going to die, that you're probably going to feel a little bit panicked, but it's important to remain calm throughout the experience, because if you do panic, you're going to increase your anxiety. It's not going to dissipate. And usually, most of the time, with these negative side effects, they might pass within a few minutes, and it might be 1 or 2 hours. But the fact of the matter is that these negative side effects will pass, and it's important to remember that. So avoid panicking. Now, you can also chew or sniff peppercorns. As strange as this sounds, there are terpenes present in peppercorns that have a calming effect, which, when consumed or chewed or smelled, these peppercorns will actually soothe you and relieve you of some of that anxiety or paranoia that you might be experiencing. Another thing is to drink water and eat some light snacks. Now, some people might feel like they'd rather drink some juice or maybe even drink some alcohol, but so juice can have terpenes that can actually have the opposite effect of the peppercorns. Like, for example, that's why a lot of people will say eating mango will enhance your high. Like eating mango before smoking, or eating mango before or after eating an edible. Those terpenes in the mango will actually enhance your high. And if you're in a place where you're already way too high, you don't want to eat a mango, you don't want to drink mango juice, you don't want to drink a fruit juice that could contain these terpenes that will enhance the high, because you're looking to come down from it. You're not looking to enhance that. The same goes with water. Water will actually have a soothing effect. You'll feel, especially if you have cotton mouth, that'll really make the experience not so great. But drinking water and staying hydrated, especially if you're perspirating, is essential if you're having a green out, so to speak. And then it's important to relax and take some deep breaths. I know that Brett will actually be talking about some breath work today or tomorrow, I'm not sure today. He's going to be talking about some breath work, so breath work in general, but breathing and relaxing when you're having this freak out will kind of contribute to minimizing your panic and kind of getting you past those feelings of paranoia and allow those feelings to pass. And then you can also find something to distract yourself, whether that's video games or TV, calling a friend, calling a family member, all of these things to take your mind off of what's happening and your paranoia, your anxiety. That's going to help you if you have these issues. Now, it's also important, like I was saying before about my friend who thought he was going to die and thought he might be the first person to die from a THC overdose. It's important to remember that it is literally impossible to consume enough THC to die. I've had times where I've felt pretty terrible by eating too much THC, and I remember going through my head like the process of breathing it's an automated body function. You don't have to think about breathing. But I remember sitting in my bed after eating too much of a cannabis edible, and I was like, what if I fall asleep and my body forgets? Am I gonna die? It just seemed like it was terrifying. But it's important to remember that that's not going to happen. It's not possible to die from THC consumption. And then, as I said before, combating THC with CBD, it works. If you were to smoke a tremendous bong hit and then take a shot of CBD, you're not going to be high. because the CBD is going to attach to those receptors and it's going to block the THC's effects. Okay, and now we'll go over how to choose edibles as a responsible consumer. First one is to check the label. I think that might be the most obvious, but it's important to check the label of any product that you're consuming, whether it be something that does or does not contain cannabis. But in the case of THC, if you're consuming a THC edible, it's important to check the label, see how many milligrams are actually in the product. But even with a label, it's important to still look for a trustworthy brand. If the brand that you're buying from doesn't actually have a Facebook presence, an Instagram presence, an online store, actively participates in events, it might not be the best idea to trust that. You don't really know what is going into your product if there's no face to the brand. If there's no face to the brand, it's really just a label being thrown on a product that who knows what's in it, where it is, and yeah. Another thing is to ask for recommendations. Now, the most reliable person to make a recommendation for edibles is going to be your bud tender, especially if you're at a reliable, trustworthy dispensary. So it's important to ask. Ask the dispensary, ask the bud tender, ask the dispensary operator, look for recommendations, even look online. The Thailand's cannabis industry is still very new. It's an emerging industry, so there's not a lot of reviews online. I know there are a couple of people who are doing reviews. However, as the industry continues to progress, we can expect to see more and more reviews online and be able to kind of trust brands more so because of that. And now, here are some other tips for choosing edibles. Think about your lifestyle. Are you somebody who likes to Netflix and chill, or are you somebody who likes to go for a hike on the weekend? Do you like to go for bicycle rides, go to the gym? If that's the case, then you probably want a lower dose edible and something that contains sativa as opposed to indica dominant strains. Like for example, our edibles are all sativa based. So these leaves that we're using, they're organic cannabis leaves that are from Major University. They developed a sativa dominant hybrid that we're using to produce these edibles that kind of produce a nice euphoric, energetic, socializing experience. Then you want to consider your tolerance. If you're a new consumer, you don't want to start with a 50 milligram edible. You might want to start with something much lower, introductory level, maybe 1.6 milligrams or less, or even up to 10 milligrams. But as a new edibles consumer, it's important to remember that your tolerance is what's going to play the largest role besides your body in how your edible experience is going to be. Now, you also want to be prepared, especially if you're new to edibles. So, eating an edible, you want to have water on hand. You don't want to be in a place that you don't have access to food or water. You also want to make sure that you have something to do. There's nothing worse than sitting down and then feeling the onset of an edible and then just being like, well, what now? What am I doing with myself? Have a plan. Be prepared. Make sure you have everything in place. That way you don't have to worry about where you're getting your next meal if you get hungry. You don't have to worry about driving or riding a motorbike someplace. And then another thing that's important is to be patient. One of the most common reasons why people are overdosing on cannabis and taking too much THC is because they're not patient enough. There's way too many stories of people going out, eating an edible, not feeling it within 45 minutes, and then saying, you know what, I think I'm going to take another one. And that's the difference between taking a 10 milligram edible and a 20 milligram edible. It can really add up very quickly. So it's important to be patient. And think about what's in your stomach. If you're out drinking, you have to remember that alcohol is going to increase the concentration of THC in your blood. But you'll also need to remember that if you eat a light meal, for example, once you eat a light meal, your metabolism is actually going up. So your metabolism is almost like an engine. And by eating something light before eating an edible, you're increasing your metabolism, which can cause the edible to affect you and hit you harder than it would otherwise. Whereas if you were to eat a larger meal, even though your metabolism might be higher, you have to wait for that edible to kind of get into your stomach, get into your digestive tract, and get absorbed. But yeah. And so that is the end of my talk. If you guys would like, this is our QR code. We have stickers as well at our stand. If you want to scan this and follow us on social media, add us online, we'd really appreciate it. The support's always appreciated. And you'll also be able to learn more about us. We have education sections as well. So you can learn more about edibles. We have sections in Thai and English as well. So we're one of the few people who have a Thai language section, which we're really proud of that. And that is our logo. Cannabis Cookies, treats you can trust. Always know what's in every baked bite. And let's not forget, hit my slides, many thanks to Ash. Ash is a good friend of mine, and it is called Overnight Design. They do slideshows, PowerPoint presentations like this one. Really awesome service. Love it, and it's quick. Less than 24 hours. Pretty awesome. And thanks for listening, guys.
Awesome. Big round of applause for Mr. Lewis. Any questions? Any questions from the audience or anybody want to chime in?
Anybody have any questions? Happy to answer them.
What sort of scale at the moment are you selling to? You're selling online?
So we're selling online. Scale-wise, we're not selling at scale just yet because we're waiting on FDA approval. Once we have FDA approval, we're going to hit that marketing very hard. Exactly. We have sets of 6, which allow up to 9.6 milligrams of THC. And the way we're doing this is we're individually packing our cookies, where each cookie is 1.6 milligrams, which is within the Thai restrictions, which allows us to do a 9.6 milligram box in essence.
How hard is it to actually test and work with the regulations with the extracts to actually get the right sort of material to cook into a recipe to not have too much content in the cookie?
So we actually get it tested. It has to be an FDA licensed facility that we get tested at, which makes it so that we know exactly what's in every cookie.
So you cook your leaf, you basically use a leaf product instead of an extract.
Exactly.
But the cooked leaf is the extract.
Yes.
That's what you then have tested?
No, we have the cookies themselves tested afterwards.
After the product.
Yes.
So do you find that sometimes for the variability of your leaf product, you can get cookies that are then not saleable?
We only use the leaves from the university. So we're not using any other strains because then we would have to, if we did do that, we would have to make sure that, exactly, because even if it was the same strain, different grow conditions will actually contribute to less THC or more THC in the leaves. We want to kind of delete as many variables as possible.
You're sort of experimenting through the quality stage to get a product in a leaf that you've got that's suitable for cooking your biscuits every time.
Yeah.
So you don't end up wasting the biscuits because they test over.
Exactly. Yeah, we're one of the few people that are actually purchasing the leaves in bulk, because most people aren't using the leaves. That's why you're not seeing. I'm pretty confident when I say this. There isn't another product on the market that's legal that's getting people high.
Oh, yeah. This
product.
Sort of wondered for the while these laws, if they're flower extracts, I mean, how do any of them meet the requirements?
Mm-hmm.
Or you have to treat the cannabinoids to break down the THC.
Say again, I'm sorry?
So you have to treat the molecule, the THC molecule, to actually reduce the amount of THC from flower extracts.
Yeah, well, what we could do, if we did flower extracts, we can still do, we would just do like, for example, we might be able to extract, let's say 100 milligrams from a half ounce of flour or something versus, let's say, 10 milligrams. Exactly. So we could do something like that. I look forward to the milligrams being increased as well as the ability to use THC distillate legally, because there is a place for it in this industry, especially for patients. Minimally speaking, it should be legal for patients. Recreational use, there's a need for it, there's a market for it. The market's going to exist regardless of whether it's legal or not. But it would be nice, it would be nice to be able to do that legally.
And is there a scene that the Thai government is going to change the levels of THC?
I haven't heard anything about it yet, but when they do, we're ready to produce. We're hoping for, we really would like 10 milligrams to be the new limit with THC distillate allowed, because if that was the case, we'd be able to produce boxes of cookies that would do the same as this, except on a higher dose level. Exactly. Yes.
Oh, it was really interesting, Ross.
Cheers, appreciate the question.
So you have max 1.6 milligrams THC.
Yes.
So how strong is that versus like your average normal cookie?
So in the US, the limit is usually 10 milligrams per dose. But even though, so it's actually really surprising to me because, like I said, I've been producing edibles for over a decade in the US. Usually in the US, I was using flower. And when I found out that it was legal to use the leaves of the plant to create an edible, this was actually way before June 9th, when everybody was really excited that decriminalization happened. I was actually having kind of a oh shit moment because we were already doing a edible using the leaves of the plant. It's just the edibles that we were doing before June 9th were actually much stronger than they are now. We actually had to have the dose like, I think it was like 6 times or something to make it where we could produce a legal edible here. And basically, it was, we were in the process before legalization happened. We were actually, there was a law, it was a loophole law that allowed us to produce legally a cannabis edible using the leaves of the plant, and we didn't have to get it tested. There was a loophole that allowed us to create an edible that was a freshly made product with an open package, and in essence, the Thai law that was put in place before June 9th, it was about a year, it was in place for about a year beforehand, and it says that if you have a fresh product, you don't have to get FDA approval to sell it. So what we were planning to do was we were going to do our cookies, except with an open packaging as a fresh product and selling it that way without testing. And then when June 9th came around, we were like, okay, well we have to, if we're gonna do this, we need to make sure that we're doing it the right way, get tested, get FDA, do what we have to do to make it work. And
So how strong are they?
these edibles now,
Yeah, the ones you make now.
up to 1.6 milligrams.
How high will I get if I ate one?
Depends how many you eat. So like,
So you have to eat a
I can give you an example of my experience. Everybody's body is going to be different. But for example, I have a friend of mine that he isn't a cannabis consumer. He eats them occasionally, he eats cookies. And one time he had 1.5 of our cookies and he actually got high. Then another time he had 2 of the cookies and he got very high. And he actually contacted me and said, I think your dosing is off, which it's not. Our dosing isn't off.
You do only cookies or you have other stuff too?
We're doing only cookies for now, but we're going to be doing CBD cookies as well as CBD dog treats eventually.
CBD dog treats.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. We actually have 4 dogs. Yeah.
And we have one more brief question. I think I saw one more hand, or no, maybe not.
Any hands?
You think? I think. Did you want to ask still a question?
You mentioned about the level milligram of THC in your eligible. How do you measure when you create the oils from the incarnation of the weed? How are you able to measure it before you apply it to the final form?
So we're using the same leaves grown by the same university every time. They have their own process in place to make sure that their leaves are consistent, and then it comes down to weighing the leaves themselves and making sure that that's accurate. And then we go for testing through an FDA-approved facility. But yeah, that allows us to maintain. at least some consistency. Although I'm still not convinced that the FDA testing facility is actually correct. I still feel like they might be incorrect about that, but I'll take it. You know, as long as they are saying our product's legal, that is okay enough for us.
Thank you very much for your question. Is there anything else? All right. Big round of applause for Lewis again. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Ken.